Rumors circulated through the underworld that their marriage was nothing more than a cruel joke, a lethal cartel boss taking a soft, plus-size bride. But the moment he caught her throwing away her meals, starving herself to meet the syndicate's twisted standards, he didn't feel pity. Instead, he made a terrifying vow that would soon leave the city in ruins. The Romano family did not forgive debts. They bled them out of you. Minna Johnson learned this undeniable truth on a freezing Tuesday in November, standing in the flour-dusted kitchen of her father's Bronx bakery. Her father Thomas owed $3 million to the New York syndicate. The money was gone, swallowed by a failed expansion and crippling gambling habits. The enforcers who came to collect weren't interested in apologies, but the man who stepped out from behind the armed thugs, Dante Romano, the undisputed capo of the 5 boroughs, wasn't interested in blood. He was looking for a wife. Dante needed a bride to secure his inheritance, a stipulation written into his late grandfather's will to prove he was settling down. The society women of Manhattan bored him. The cartel daughters were too treacherous. When his cold obsidian eyes landed on Minna, the deal was struck, her life for her father's debt. Minna was not a mafia princess. She was 24, undeniably fat and used to fading into the background. She had thick thighs, a heavy stomach, and arms that jiggled when she kneaded dough. In her neighborhood, her softness was just a part of who she was, a sweet girl who baked the best cannolis on Arthur Avenue. But thrust into the opulent, merciless world of the Manhattan elite, her body became a weapon used against her. Their wedding at St. Patrick's Cathedral was a spectacle of wealth and barely veiled contempt. As Minna walked down the aisle in a custom A-line gown that took yards of extra silk, she heard the whispers. They didn't even try to hide them. Look at her. Dante must have lost a bet. I heard she ate the original bride. I give it a week before he locks that pig in the penthouse and goes back to his mistresses. The loudest and cruelest voice belonged to Camilla Bianchi, the razor-thin, stiletto-wearing daughter of a rival underboss who had fully expected to be the one wearing Dante's ring. Dante stood at the altar, a monolith of custom Italian tailoring and lethal indifference. He said his vows with a steady baritone voice, slid a 5-carat diamond onto her plump finger, and kissed her with a terrifyingly blank expression. He was fulfilling a contract. To him, she was a piece of collateral, or so Minna thought. When they moved into Dante's sprawling glass-walled penthouse in Tribeca, the true isolation began. Dante was consumed by a brewing territory war with the Russian mob. He left before dawn and returned long after she was asleep. Minna was left alone in a gilded cage surrounded by an army of silent staff and the deafening echo of Camilla's wedding day insults. The turning point happened 3 weeks into the marriage. Minna was forced to attend a charity gala alongside the other syndicate wives. When she walked into the fitting room of a high-end boutique, the saleswoman took one look at her heavy figure and sneered. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Romano, but designers rarely lend out pieces in a size. Well, your size. We can drape you in something unstructured." Humiliated, Minna retreated. The psychological warfare waged by Camilla and the other wives was relentless. They sent gifts to the penthouse diet pills disguised as vitamins, gym memberships, wrapped in silk bows and health cookbooks. Minna broke. Looking at her wide hips and soft belly in the floor-to-ceiling mirrors of her luxurious bathroom, she decided the only way to survive this ruthless world was to shrink herself until she fit into it. She stopped eating. It started subtly. She skipped breakfast, claiming she had eaten early. Lunch was a single cup of black coffee. Dinner, prepared by Dante's private Michelin-starred chef, was pushed around her plate, cleverly hidden under lettuce leaves or napkins, before being sent back to the kitchen. The gnawing ache in her stomach became a twisted source of comfort. It was a distraction from the crushing loneliness. She bought a scale, hiding it under the marble vanity. Every morning she chased the dropping numbers: 1 pound, 3 pounds, 5. But her body fought back. The abrupt starvation made her lethargic, her normally rosy, plump cheeks turning a sallow grey. Her hands shook constantly, and a permanent brain fog settled over her. Yet when Camilla gave her an approving, albeit condescending nod at a Sunday syndicate brunch, Minna felt a sick sense of victory. The shrinking was working. She didn't realize that in the world of predators, nothing goes unnoticed. And Dante Romano was the apex predator. Dante Romano commanded an empire of violence and vice, a man whose mind was a steel trap of logistics and situational awareness. You do not survive 3 assassination attempts by missing details. At first he had kept his distance from his new bride. Minna was timid, soft, and skittish qualities that made Dante violently protective, but utterly incapable of expressing it without terrifying her. He watched her on the penthouse security cameras, when he was locked in his study, mesmerized by the gentle sway of her wide hips and the plush softness of her thighs. In a world full of sharp edges, Minna was the only thing that looked like peace. But by the 5th week of their marriage, the peace was fracturing. Dante noticed the subtle changes first. The way her oversized sweaters began to hang off her shoulders like loose sails. The way she gripped the marble countertops to steady herself when she stood up too fast. The dark, bruising shadows under her eyes. Then came the reports from the staff. His head of security, a gruff ex-military man named Leo, slipped a folder onto Dante's mahogany desk one evening. "Boss," Leo said, shifting uncomfortably. "The chef. He says the missus isn't eating. Hasn't touched a real meal in 14 days. We checked the garbage. She's throwing the food away and burying it under coffee grounds." Dante's blood ran cold. He dismissed Leo with a curt nod, his jaw tight enough to crack teeth. He pulled up the security footage of the dining room from the past week. Fast-forwarding through the tapes, he watched his wife, his sweet, beautiful, soft wife, slice a piece of steak into microscopic fragments, chew a single piece of asparagus for 3 minutes, and then quietly scrape the rest into a napkin. A dark, violent fury ignited in his chest. Dante didn't feel pity. He felt the overwhelming urge to burn the city to the ground. Someone had poisoned her mind. Someone had made her feel that the body he obsessed over wasn't good enough. The climax reached its breaking point on a Thursday evening. Dante had ordered a mandatory dinner at the penthouse, inviting 3 of his top underbosses and their wives to discuss a newly acquired shipping route. Camilla Bianchi was among them, wearing a skin-tight red dress and a smirk. Minna emerged from the master suite, wearing a black, long-sleeved dress. She looked exhausted. As she took her seat beside Dante at the head of the long dining table, she swayed slightly, her pale hands immediately reaching for her water glass. The chef served a rich, decadent osso buco with saffron risotto. The room filled with the clatter of silver and murmured business talk. Dante, however, wasn't participating. His dark, unreadable eyes were locked entirely on his wife. Minna picked up her fork, her hand visibly trembling. She stared at the meat as if it were poison. She took a sip of water, pushed a grain of rice around the plate, and set the fork down. "Not hungry, Minna," Camilla's voice sliced through the chatter, dripping with venomous sweetness. "I suppose that's for the best. Fasting does wonders for discipline." A few of the other wives exchanged muffled giggles. Minna flushed a deep, humiliating crimson. I have a stomachache," she whispered, staring at her lap. Dante slowly placed his heavy silver knife onto the table. The sharp clack echoed like a gunshot. The entire room went dead silent. The air in the dining room instantly dropped 10 degrees. "Leave," Dante commanded. His voice was dangerously soft, a lethal murmur that sent a shiver down the spine of every hardened criminal at the table. One of the underbosses blinked. "Boss, we haven't finished the—" "I said get the hell out of my house!" Dante's roar rattled the crystal chandelier above them. Within seconds, the guests scrambled from their chairs, practically tripping over each other, to escape the capo's wrath. Camilla looked terrified, her arrogant smirk wiped clean as she fled toward the private elevator. When the doors slid shut, the penthouse was suffocatingly quiet. Minna was frozen in her chair, tears welling in her eyes. She was terrified. She thought Dante was angry at her for embarrassing him in front of his crew. She thought he was finally going to cast her out. Dante stood up slowly. He walked around the massive table until he was standing directly behind her chair. His large, scarred hands gently gripped her shoulders. He could feel the prominent ridge of her collarbone beneath the fabric, a bone that hadn't been visible a month ago. The realization made his chest physically ache. "Minna," he said, his voice dropping into a dark, gravelly register. "Look at me." She slowly turned her head, a tear slipping down her cheek. Dante pulled up a chair and sat directly beside her, trapping her between his massive frame and the table. He reached out his thumb, catching the tear on her cheek. "You are starving yourself." He stated a chilling mix of rage and raw agony in his tone. "You are shrinking the body that belongs to me." "Why?" Minna choked on a sob, the dam finally breaking. "Because I'm an embarrassment to you," she cried out, her hands covering her face. "I hear them, Dante. I hear what they say. I don't fit in your world. I'm too heavy, I'm too soft, I'm just fat. I just wanted to be beautiful enough for you." Dante's eyes darkened to pitch black. The confession was a knife twisting in his gut. "Listen to me very carefully," he whispered, leaning in so close his breath fanned across her trembling lips. "I am a man who takes exactly what he wants. If I wanted a skin-and-bone socialite who survives on celery and arrogance, I would have married one. I chose you. I chose every pound, every curve, every inch of your softness." He grabbed her plate of untouched osso buco and slid it directly in front of her. "Here is what is going to happen," Dante continued, his voice shifting into the terrifying absolute authority of a cartel boss issuing a mandate. "You are going to pick up that fork, and you are going to eat this meal. And tomorrow, you are going to eat 3 more. If I catch you skipping a meal, if I catch you weighing yourself, or if I find one more plate hidden in the garbage—" He paused, letting the silence stretch before delivering the dark threat that would alter the course of their marriage forever. "I will not punish you, Minna, but I swear on my grandfather's grave I will find every single person who ever looked at you sideways, every woman who ever whispered a joke about your weight, and I will personally cut their tongues out of their heads, starting with Camilla Bianchi." Minna gasped, her eyes flying open in sheer shock. "Dante, no. You can't." "I am Dante Romano," he interrupted smoothly, his gaze burning with a manic, possessive obsession. "I can do whatever I please, and I will burn this entire city to ash before I let them make my wife hate the body I worship. Eat Minna, or I start making phone calls." Trembling, utterly overwhelmed by the terrifying magnitude of his protection, Minna reached for her fork. The first bite of the saffron risotto felt like swallowing lead, but as the rich, buttery flavor hit Minna's tongue, her starving body violently woke up. She closed her eyes, a choked gasp escaping her lips, and took another bite. Then another. Dante did not move. He sat rigidly beside her, his massive presence shielding her from the vast, empty dining room. He watched her with an intensity that burned right through her skin, his dark eyes tracking the movement of her throat as she swallowed. When her plate was half empty, she paused her stomach, protesting the sudden influx of rich food. Dante didn't force her to finish it. He simply poured her a glass of vintage Barolo wine, pushing it gently toward her trembling fingertips. "Good girl," he murmured, his voice a low, gravelly rumble that sent a shiver down her spine. That night marked the absolute end of Minna's silent suffering and the beginning of Dante Romano's ironclad reign over her recovery. Dante was not a man of gentle therapeutic affirmations. He was a warlord of logistics. He tackled her starvation the same way he dismantled rival cartels systematically and without mercy. By 8 a.m. the next morning, the penthouse staff was summoned and given a new set of unbreakable mandates. First, the scale. It was confiscated from beneath her bathroom vanity and smashed to pieces by Leo, the head of security in the alleyway behind the building. Second, the wardrobe. Every oversized shape-hiding sweater and restrictive shapewear garment Minna owned was bagged up and thrown into the incinerator. Dante personally ordered a team of elite stylists from Bergdorf Goodman to the penthouse. They arrived with measuring tapes and racks of luxurious fabrics. Minna was measured for custom silks and cashmeres that hugged her wide hips, celebrated her heavy breasts, and draped perfectly over her thick thighs. There was no more hiding. Finally, the diet. Minna was to be served 3 full nutrient-dense meals a day. If she missed one, Dante made it clear he would abandon whatever multi-million-dollar illicit negotiation he was handling, fly across the city, and feed her himself. To Minna's astonishment, Dante's dark threat at the dinner table wasn't just a terrifying bluff to force her to eat. He began systematically dismantling the lives of the women who had driven his wife to the brink. It started quietly, a series of precise, devastating strikes disguised as bad luck. Victoria Kensington, one of Camilla's closest friends, who had cruelly gifted Minna the disguised diet pills, was the first to fall. Within 48 hours, her husband, Arthur's highly lucrative underground casino, was raided, following an anonymous, heavily detailed tip to the NYPD. The Kensingtons were left financially ruined, their syndicate privileges permanently revoked. They fled to a grim suburb in Ohio before the week was out. Next came Beatrice Russo, who had snickered at Minna's body during a Sunday brunch. Her husband, Dominic, a ruthless loan shark, mysteriously lost his entire territory overnight to Dante's enforcers. Beatrice was publicly turned away from the velvet ropes of Manhattan's most elite underground clubs, effectively erasing her from New York high society. But Dante saved his most surgical brutal strike for Camilla Bianchi. Camilla's arrogant power stemmed entirely from her father, Lorenzo Bianchi, who controlled the Brooklyn shipping ports. Dante didn't just want to hurt the Bianchis, he wanted them utterly and publicly humiliated. 2 weeks after the dinner incident, the syndicate hosted the annual Winter Solstice Gala at the Waldorf Astoria. It was the undisputed crown jewel of Mafia social events, a glittering display of wealth and danger. Minna attended on Dante's arm. She was terrified, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird, but she looked absolutely breathtaking. She wore a custom emerald green gown designed personally by Christian Siriano. The heavy velvet featured a plunging neckline that showcased her ample cleavage and gathered perfectly at her waist before flowing over her wide hips. The sallow, sickly grey of her starvation was entirely gone, replaced by a radiant, flushed warmth. When they entered the grand chandelier-lit ballroom, the whispering stopped immediately, not out of mockery, but out of sheer, unadulterated fear. Dante's reputation for his recent ruthless purges preceded him. Camilla Bianchi stood near the towering champagne fountain, flanked by her father. She sneered out of habit as Minna approached, But the arrogant smirk died violently on her lips when Dante stepped directly into her path, his broad shoulders blocking her view of his wife. "Lorenzo," Dante said smoothly, his voice easily carrying over the string quartet playing in the corner. "It is a profound shame about the federal seizure of your docks this morning." Lorenzo's face drained of all color, his champagne flute trembling. What seizure, Dante? What are you talking about?" "The feds," Dante replied, casually swirling his whiskey. "They intercepted 3 of your cargo ships at dawn. Contraband, illegal weapons. I imagine the federal indictments are being unsealed by a judge as we speak. You are a liability, Lorenzo." Camilla gasped, her perfectly manicured hands flying to her mouth. "You set us up?" Dante leaned in, his obsidian eyes locking onto Camilla with the terrifying warmth of an executioner. "I told my wife I would cut the tongues out of the people who disrespected her. Consider the loss of your family's empire a mercy. If you ever speak Minna's name again, if you ever even look in her direction, I will not be so diplomatic." He turned his back on them, dismissively offering his arm to Minna. As Lorenzo dragged his hysterical daughter out of the ballroom, the message to the rest of the underworld was crystal clear. The Donna is untouchable. The sheer unmitigated destruction of the Bianchi family empire brought a terrifying, insulated peace to Minna's world, but desperate, ruined people do not simply fade away into the shadows. A month had passed since the gala. Under Dante's absolute, uncompromising protection, Minna's body had fully bloomed back into its soft, heavy glory. The constant gnawing anxiety that had once scraped at her bones was permanently replaced by a shocking, undeniable realization. Dante Romano didn't just tolerate her plus-size figure. He was deeply, ravenously obsessed with it. Behind the closed, bulletproof oak doors of their Tribeca master suite, he worshipped her as if she were a deity. He spent hours tracing the delicate silver stretch marks on her wide hips, kissing the soft, plush curve of her belly and tangling his large, scarred hands in her thick thighs. He made her feel like a priceless Renaissance sculpture carved from warm marble rather than a problem society needed to solve. He adorned her with custom Cartier bracelets, tailored specifically to fit her plump wrists, and draped her in silks that celebrated her heavy breasts. His dark, unwavering devotion rebuilt her shattered confidence brick by brick. But Minna knew the brutal truth of their reality. A queen cannot survive in the Mafia by hiding behind her king forever. Sooner or later, she had to claim the heavy, blood-soaked crown herself. On a bitterly cold, snowy afternoon in late December, Minna requested a visit to her father's bakery in the Bronx, Johnson & Sons, nestled deep in the heart of Arthur Avenue. Dante was tied up in a highly volatile, high-stakes sit-down with the Chicago outfit at Sparks Steakhouse in Midtown, so he dispatched Leo and 2 heavily armed cartel guards to escort her. The bakery smelled exactly as it always had, a comforting, intoxicating blend of warm yeast-powdered sugar and the simple safety of her past. Minna was laughing, her cheeks flushed with life, as she dusted a massive silver tray of fresh cannolis with a sifter when the brass bell above the front door chimed sharply. It wasn't a customer seeking refuge from the biting New York snow. It was Camilla Bianchi. Camilla looked completely deranged, a terrifying skeletal shadow of the pristine, untouchable socialite she had been just weeks ago. Her once immaculate cream-colored Burberry trench coat was heavily stained with filthy city slush and dried grime. Her signature blonde hair was a tangled, greasy mess, and her cheekbones jutted out so sharply from her hollowed, sallow face that she looked like a walking corpse. The federal indictments had stripped her family of absolutely everything. Her father, Lorenzo, was currently sitting in a maximum security cell at Rikers Island, facing 20 years for racketeering, and Camilla's offshore accounts were completely frozen by the FBI. In her shaking right hand, Camilla held a silver, snub-nosed Smith & Wesson revolver, its barrel trembling as she pointed it directly at Minna's chest. Leo instantly drew his Glock, screaming a lethal warning for Camilla to drop the weapon, his finger hovering over the trigger. But Minna did not flinch. Instead, she held up her flour-covered hand, her palm facing her bodyguard. "Wait!" Minna commanded. The sheer, undeniable authority in her own voice shocked her, echoing off the tiled walls of the bakery. "You ruined my life, you fat pig!" Camilla screamed, hysterical tears streaming down her dirty, sunken cheeks. "You stole my husband, you stole my crown, and you destroyed my father. I have absolutely nothing left. I'm going to blow a hole right through your chest." Pref. For a fleeting, microscopic second, the ghost of the old Minna, the deeply insecure, timid girl who had literally starved herself to the brink of organ failure just to appease vicious women, exactly like Camilla, wanted to cower behind the glass pastry display case. But as she looked at the shaking, pathetic, broken woman standing in front of her, Minna realized something profound. Camilla was the one starving now, not just physically, but completely starved of power, starved of relevance, and starved of substance. Minna, with all her heavy weight, all her unapologetic softness, and all her expansive curves, was the most powerful woman in the city, because she was deeply, fiercely loved by a monster who would gladly burn the world to ash for her. "I didn't steal your life, Camilla," Minna said, stepping slowly and deliberately around the glass counter. Leo tensed, ready to fire, but Minna moved with a lethal, mesmerizing grace. "You lost it because you mistakenly thought cruelty was the exact same thing as strength." "Shut up!" Camilla shrieked, her thumb shaking violently as she pulled back the hammer of the revolver with a sickening click. "Pull the trigger!" Minna challenged, her voice dropping into a chilling, emotionless, deadpan frequency that sounded terrifyingly like her husband. "Kill me right now, but you know exactly what happens next." Minna took another confident step forward, her chin raised. "Dante won't just kill you. He will torture you for weeks in a soundproof basement. He will bribe the guards at Rikers, rip your father out of federal custody, and skin him alive right in front of your eyes. You are pointing a loaded gun at the capo's wife. You are already a dead woman." Camilla's hand shook so violently she could barely hold the weapon. The heavy, suffocating reality of Minna's words crashed down on her fragile psyche. "You spent so much of your life mocking my body," Minna whispered, stepping so incredibly close that the cold steel barrel of the gun nearly brushed her flour-dusted apron. "But look at us now. I am the Donna of the 5 boroughs, and you are nothing but a starving ghost. Drop the gun." A broken, agonizing sob tore out of Camilla's raw throat. Her numb, frozen fingers opened, and the heavy revolver clattered loudly onto the black and white tiled floor. Leo was on her in a microsecond, slamming her violently against the brick wall and tightly zip-tying her frail wrists together. When Dante arrived 22 minutes later, his armored Cadillac Escalade screeching sideways onto the icy asphalt of Arthur Avenue, he practically tore the bakery's reinforced door off its hinges. His obsidian eyes were wide, completely feral, with a desperate panic no one in the criminal underworld had ever witnessed. He found Minna sitting calmly at a high-top table, casually sipping a double espresso. "Minna." He breathed a ragged exhale, escaping his lungs as he pulled her out of the chair and crushed her soft, heavy body against his broad chest. "I'm going to kill her. I'm going to bury her under the East River." "No, Dante," Minna interrupted, gently placing her warm hands on his tense jaw and looking directly into his wild eyes. "She is already broken. Killing her is a quick mercy she simply doesn't deserve. Let her live in the freezing streets she used to own and let her watch us rule them from above. Dante froze, staring down at his soft, heavy bride. He was utterly captivated by the immovable iron spine he saw beneath her gorgeous curves. A slow, dark, incredibly proud smile spread across his handsome face. He leaned down and kissed her deeply right there in the flour-dusted bakery in the Bronx, murmuring against her warm lips, "My beautiful, brilliant queen, the world is yours." Did you love seeing Minna embrace her curves and claim her mafia crown? The underworld might be ruthless, but nothing is more powerful than a woman who finally recognizes her own worth and the man who destroys the world to protect her. If Dante and Minna's dark romance kept you on the edge of your seat, smash that like button, share this story with your fellow romance drama lovers, and subscribe to our channel for more thrilling stories.